Islamic State group claims responsibility for Iran suicide bombings, killing at least 84 people. Blinken heads to the Mideast again as fears of regional conflict surge. Houthis launch sea drone to attack ships hours after U.S. Allies issue final warning. Today is Friday, January 5th, 2024, and this is the Dunkley Report. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for 2 suicide bombings targeting a commemoration for an Iranian general slain in a 2020 U.S. drone strike. The bombings Wednesday marked the worst militant attack to strike Iran in decades as the wider Middle East remains on edge. Experts who follow the group have confirmed that the statement Thursday, which was circulated online among jihadists, came from the extremists, who likely hope to take advantage of the chaos gripping the region amid Israel's war on Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Wednesday's attack in Kerman killed at least 84 people and wounded another 284. As the Biden administration grapples with an increasingly tense and unstable situation in the Middle East, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to the region this weekend for the 4th time in 3 months, on a tour expected to focus largely on easing resurgent fears that the Israel-Hamas war could erupt into a broader conflict. The Biden administration had breathed a sigh of relief about the potential for a broader Mideast war in the immediate aftermath of Israel's military response to the deadly October 7th Hamas attacks in Israel. 2.5 months later, though, the chances of a regional war have increased. The State Department says Blinken will visit Turkey, Greece, Jordan, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the West Bank, and Egypt. An armed unmanned surface vessel launched from Houthi-controlled Yemen got within a couple of miles of U.S. Navy and commercial vessels in the Red Sea before detonating. Thursday's attack took place just hours after the White House and a host of partner nations issued a final warning to the Iran-backed militia group to cease the attacks or face potential military action. Vice Admiral Brad Cooper, who heads U.S. Navy operations in the Middle East, said it was the first time the Houthis had used an unmanned surface vessel, or USV, since their harassment of commercial ships in the Red Sea began after the outbreak of the Israel-Hamas war. Israel's defense minister has laid out his vision for the next phase of the war in Gaza. Yoav Gallant issued a statement Thursday describing how Israeli forces would shift to an apparently scaled-down combat approach in northern Gaza, while continuing to fight Hamas in the south of the territory for as long as necessary. Ahead of a visit by the U.S. Secretary of State, Gallant also outlined a proposal for how Gaza would be run once Hamas is defeated. He said Israel would keep security control while an undefined Israeli-guided Palestinian body runs day-to-day administration. The U.S. and other countries would oversee rebuilding. Israel's defense minister has laid out a vision for the next phase of the war in Gaza. Yoav Gallant described how Israeli forces would shift to an apparently scaled-down combat approach in northern Gaza and continue to fight Hamas in the south of the territory. Gallant also outlined a proposal Thursday for how Gaza would be run once Hamas is defeated. He says Israel would keep security control while an undefined Palestinian body runs day-to-day administration. Gallant's office says the ideas are his and not official policy. Heavy fighting continues in central Gaza and the southern city of Khan Yunis. In Lebanon's capital, meanwhile, thousands of people paid their respects to a top Hamas commander who was killed earlier this week in an apparent Israeli airstrike on Beirut. President Vladimir Putin has signed a decree that speeds up a path to Russian citizenship for foreigners who enlist in the country's military amid the 22-month-old war in Ukraine. The move comes as Moscow is trying to replenish its troops in Ukraine by various methods, including the recruitment of migrants. Russia is a magnet for tens of thousands of people from poorer Central Asian countries who seek citizenship each year. The new decree says it should take a month for authorities to consider citizenship applications from foreigners who sign contracts with the military. Previous decrees allowing fast-track citizenship for those enlisting in the Army said the decision should be made in not more than 3 months. Russia's defense ministry says air defenses shot down 10 Ukrainian air-launched missiles over the Moscow-annexed Crimean Peninsula and 10 over the Russian city of Belgorod. The report Thursday comes as both sides in the war continue long-range strikes, while their frontline forces remain largely deadlocked. On Wednesday night, officials said Russia fired 2 S-300 missiles at central Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, which in the past week has come under almost daily aerial attacks. 1 person was killed in Russia's morning missile attack in central Ukraine. The White House said U.S. intelligence officials have determined that Moscow has acquired ballistic missiles from North Korea and fired at least one of them into Ukraine on December 30th. Oscar Pistorius is due to be released from prison on parole to live under strict conditions at a family home after serving nearly 9 years of his murder sentence for the shooting death of girlfriend Riva Steenkamp on Valentine's Day, 2013. The double amputee Olympic runner from South Africa was approved for parole in November. He is set to leave the Atteridgeville Correctional Center in Pretoria on Friday. Pistorius was a multiple Paralympic champion and the first amputee athlete to compete at the Olympics when he shot Steenkamp multiple times through a closed toilet door at his home. Passengers on Japan Airlines. Flight 516 were buckled up as their pilot made a final approach to Tokyo's Haneda Airport. About 2 minutes later, the Airbus A350 was on the ground, but engulfed in an orange fireball. The airliner had collided with a much smaller Coast Guard plane that had received permission to approach the same runway, but not take-off clearance. According to a transcript of traffic control communications from the minutes before Tuesday's crash. The big question to have emerged in the investigation so far is why the Bombardier Dash 8 already had entered the runway by the time the airliner came in. Thousands of people have taken to the streets in Beirut for the funeral of Saleh Aruri, top commander of militant Palestinian group Hamas, who was killed earlier this week in an apparent Israeli airstrike in the Lebanese capital. Draped in Palestinian and Hamas flags, Aruri's coffin, along with those of 2 of his comrades, were first taken Thursday to a Beirut mosque for prayers before being carried for burial at a cemetery for fallen Palestinian fighters. Lebanese officials and state media said an Israeli drone fired 2 missiles Tuesday at an apartment in Beirut's southern Musharrafiyeh district, a stronghold of Lebanon's powerful Hezbollah group, instantly killing Aruri, along with 6 other Hamas members. Today's news was reported by the Associated Press. This has been the international news for Friday, January 5th, 2024. Thanks again for joining us here at the Dunkley Report.